Hi, welcome to this San Antonio Book Festival event with writers Hena Khan, Donna Barba Higuera, and Mitali Perkins. We call this panel Why Not Both? Stories of Kids Who Tread Two Cultures. There are more and more books being published about kids who are bicultural and the difficulties and pleasures of having a dual identity. And these writers are some of the most thoughtful writers being published today on this topic. Let me tell you a little bit about them. Donna Barba Higuera grew up in Central California, surrounded by agricultural and oil fields. As a child, rather than dealing with the regular dust devils, she preferred spending recess squirreled away in the janitor's closet with a good book. Her new book is titled Lupe Wong Won't Dance, and Kirkus Reviews calls it, quote, simply delightful. She's going to tell you about it during this panel. And Hena Khan is a Pakistani-American writer who is the author of the middle grade novels Amina's Voice, Amina's Song, and More to the Story, and the picture books Golden Domes and Silver Lanterns, Under My Hijab, and It's Ramadan, Curious George, among others. Hena lives in her hometown of Rockville, Maryland, with her basketball-loving family. And our third writer, Mitali Perkins, has written several books for young readers, including Between Us and Abuela, Forward Me Back to You, You Bring the Distant Near, which was a National Book Award nominee, Rickshaw Girl, and Bamboo People. Her new book, the one she's going to be talking to you about in this video, is called Home is in Between. It's a wonderful book about what it feels like if you're a part of two cultures, like if you were born in India, like Mitali, but live in the United States. We've asked Christina Emerald Mitra to moderate this panel. Christina loves serving San Francisco, the city where she was born, raised, and currently resides. Standing on the shoulders of her working class Mexican and Filipino immigrant ancestors, she has worked for the San Francisco Public Library since 2011, first as a children's librarian, and since 2015 as the Family Engagement Coordinator. As a curator of youth and family programming, she leads with a passion for uplifting BIPOC voices, which she also brings to her work as a children's and YA lit reviewer for Kirkus Reviews. We hope you'll buy these writers' books from Nowhere Bookshop, the book festival's bookseller. Independent bookstores have had a hard time during the pandemic, so we hope you'll support them and Donna, Hena, and Mitali and the festival by purchasing these great books. Just click on the Buy the Book button on our site. And we hope you love this event.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Why Not Both? Stories of Kids Who Tread Two Cultures. My name is Christina Mitra, and I'm a children's and YA reviewer for Kirkus, as well as the Family Engagement Coordinator for San Francisco Public Library, where I curate youth and family programs. It is my sincere honor to be here with you all in San Antonio, even if virtually, to do the work that I love most, to center and celebrate BIPOC writers. Today, it is my absolute pleasure to moderate this fabulous middle grade and children's book panel with Donna Barba Higuera, Hena Khan, and Mitali Perkins. I'm going to share their bios with you right now, and then I'll give them each a chance to greet you and say a bit about the book that we're going to talk about today. So Donna Barba Higuera grew up in Central California, surrounded by agricultural and oil fields. As a child, rather than dealing with the regular dust devils, she preferred spending recess squirreled away in the janitor's closet with a good book. Her favorite hobbies were calling Dial a Story over and over again and sneaking into a restricted cemetery to weave her own spooky tales using the crumbling headstones as inspiration. Donna's middle grade and picture books are about kids who find themselves in odd and scary situations. From language to cultural differences and being biracial, life can become complicated. So, like Donna, characters tackle more than just the bizarre things that happen to them in their lives. Donna likes to write about all things funny, but also sad and creepy and magical. If you like those things, she hopes you'll read her books. Her latest book is titled Lupe Wong Won't Dance. Donna lives in Washington State with her family, 3 dogs, and 2 frogs. Hena Khan is a Pakistani-American writer. She is the author of the middle grade novels Amina's Voice, Amina's Song, and More to the Story, and the picture books Golden Domes and Silver Lanterns, Under My Hijab, and It's Ramadan, Curious George, among others. Hena lives in her hometown of Rockville, Maryland, with her basketball-loving family. You can learn more about Hena and her books by visiting her website at henakhan.com or connecting with her at Hena Khan Books. Last but not least, Mitali Perkins has written several books for young readers, including Between Us and Abuela, Forward Me Back to You, You Bring the Distant Near, which was a National Book Award nominee, a Walter Honor Book, a South Asia Book Award winner, a Publishers Weekly Best Book of the Year, and a Shelf Awareness 2017 Best Book of the Year. Rickshaw Girl, which was an NYPL Top 100 book, and Bamboo People, an ALA Top YA novel. Her latest book is titled Home is in Between. Mitali was born in India and currently resides in Northern California. Let's give a warm welcome to our amazing panelists. And authors, I would like to invite you each to just take a moment to greet our audience and introduce the book that we'll be talking about today. Donna, do you mind starting us off?
Sure. So I'm Donna. This is my most recent book, Lupe Wong Won't Dance. You can see the tabs. I've been doing lots of school visits. And Lupe Wong Won't Dance is based on an experience that one of my daughters had coming home from school and being told that she was going to have to square dance in PE, and her discomfort with that and feeling powerless. You know, she was shy, being told she was going to have to dance with a boy. There were so many things about it that just didn't ring true to her. And that night, I just started penning this character who had a voice and who would speak up for the things that I had also felt as a child, and some of the awkwardness of the middle school years, but also the quandary that we often have with race and being biracial. And this character, my daughters are also Chinese, so they have this really varied background, and this book let me explore my feelings as well as theirs. And Lupe is just this wonderful character who just is always in my mind now. And when I don't quite know what to say, I hear her chiming in. Yeah. And it was released August of 2020. So right smack dab in the middle of the pandemic, with Levine Querido, this is their first publishing year. And so it's been a blast. I've met a lot of amazing people, and I'm so happy. This book has opened up so many doors to people that I thought I was so alone in some ways, and that my kids were alone, and I'm meeting so many people and said, hey, that's me. So anyway, it's been wonderful in a lot of different ways, just not having this great character.
Great. That sounds fantastic. We were just talking the other day with friends about square dancing, and we were like, does anyone still do that? Because we remember being distinctly tortured in middle school and elementary school, and my kids have been spared.
It's still a thing.
yeah, I heard from others too, and so I love that so much. Hi everyone, my name is Hena Khan, and I'm really, really happy to be here with you. I'm, I guess, most excited to share my newest book, Amina's Song, which is the sequel to Amina's Voice, which you might have seen. And in Amina's Song, we get to continue my character Amina's journey as she continues to, really find herself. But the story begins with her actually on a journey, visiting her family in Pakistan, the uncle who we get to know in the first book. And she just falls in love with this country that she doesn't know very well, that she hasn't grown up visiting. So even though she feels a little out of place, she doesn't always know how to navigate. She doesn't speak the language fluently. She can't bargain at a market. She just, loves being surrounded by family who adore her. She creates these amazing bonds. And when she returns home, she's so excited to share her passion for this new place and what she feels as a part of her. She wants to keep a promise that she made to her uncle to share the beauty of Pakistan with her peers. And she finds that it's not as easy as she thought it would be, for various reasons. And she sets out to really challenge the narratives and the notions that many people have about places that are far away that they don't know much about. And she uses her love for music to express herself in a new way, and lots of other stuff. So I hope you'll enjoy it.
Wow, both of those books sound, I'm imagining little Mitali thinking, having access to both of your stories, and what a thrill that would have been, and how it might have really changed my own hero's journey if I'd had those books. I have a memory of Foxtrot in 7th grade. Donna, that was just, awful. I don't know, why was I learning to Foxtrot? Anyway, and Christina, it's so good to see you. Last time I saw you was the San Francisco Public Library when you invited me and my mom. You've met my mom.
I've met your mom, and I think your sister brought your mom as
Right,
well.
right.
So good to see you
Family
again.
event. And your family too. It was really lovely to be together as families. A lot of my books are about families. So this newest one, Home is in Between, features a little girl named Shanti. You could see her. She's so cute. The illustrations are by Lavanya Naidu, who is a Indian, Kolkata born as I am, illustrator based in Australia. And what I love about the story is she added so much to it. She used the colors of the Australian and the United States flag when she drew pictures about the town where Shanti and her family move. It's a Western town. Mine's in the United States, but she used red, white, and blue colors. And then when Shanti's missing her village, Lavanya used the colors of the Indian flag to represent that. And so the book goes back. Shanti's going back and forth in the book between the two cultures. She's thinking about Halloween, and she's coming, but then at home, they're calling their family at Holi, and she's watching Bollywood movies and Hollywood movies. And so she's going back and forth, but the book really is about code switching that I did. And it sounds like the two of you guys did too growing up. And I think you did too, Christina, back and forth, and, Indian music and Bengali music and Western music, and just how tiring that gets as a child. In the book, she gets really exhausted. You could see poor little Shanti just tired out from all the back and forth. But the other thing that Lavanya did is she added a little blue elephant in the book. And so I ran out and I bought one for myself, because this little blue elephant goes with Shanti back and forth between the cultures. And so I got one, and I love my little elephant. So that's what my book's about.
Thank you both. Thank you all so much. I think, if you haven't experienced these books yet, I think by the end of today, you're going to be just vying for the moment that you can read these. And we hope that you will consider purchasing Lupe Wong Won't Dance, Amina's Song, and Home is in Between from Nowhere Bookshop, which is the Book Festival's bookseller. As you know, independent booksellers have really had a hard time during the pandemic. So we hope that you'll support them and these writers and the festival by purchasing these incredible books. So all you have to do is click on the Buy the Book button on the festival website, or go to your local library. So each of you just already touched on so many different themes, but I guess just as an opener, I'm just hoping that you can speak a little bit more about what are the themes that you really hope that most readers take away from your books. And feel free to jump in whatever order you'd like to do.
I can go, since we'll just go clockwise. So I think theme-wise for my books, I think a lot of us, when we're writing a book, we don't have a theme in mind. I think a lot of times they happen organically. You're going along and things happen. And for me, I started out with just the theme of having agency for things that didn't pass the smell test, as a middle schooler, and feeling like my daughter did, is like, wait, why am I square dancing? What does this have to do with me and my culture? Why do I have to dance with a boy? There were all these things about agency. And then as I was writing the book, there were other things and themes that came up with Lupe navigating friendships and like kind of gender biases. And, some of her closest friends are boys, and at an age where I think a lot of kids are trying to navigate that, the boy girl thing, and can I be friends with a boy? And I wanted to challenge that a little bit, but I didn't mean to when I was writing it. It just kind of came up. And then, of course, in my book, when she was researching, which this came about while writing the book, I'd already written the first draft, and I was doing research on square dancing. And my agent was the one who sent me an NPR article on some of the original lyrics to some of the songs to square dancing. And I think it was called the ice cream truck song. It was an NPR article, and it spoke to how a lot of the original lyrics were extremely racist. And I thought, okay, well, if Lupe's trying to get rid of square dancing, she's going to research this. And if she's going to create a PowerPoint, she's going to find out this information just as I am right now. And so this theme came up of, okay, so what do you do as a child if you feel that you need to speak up for something and then you find something that's really uncomfortable in addition to that? How do you do that? How do you bring that up to adults and in a way that you can exact change? And once I started reading, once you see something and you peel the curtain back a little bit as a writer, you can't really ignore it. And so it would have been a lot easier to not do that. But I was like, wow, this is going to be hard, but I had to let Lupe digest that. And I thought, okay, a kid reading this book, how can I help them digest it? And Lupe was funny anyway. I don't think she meant to be funny, but the book, she kind of is a comedy of disasters throughout the book. And I think that some of that comedic relief allowed me to address some of those more serious themes that come up. And I think, I don't want to take, Mitali's fire, but it's the same thing, like with illustration and showing. You want a child reading this to be able to go, okay, I can see how this child's feeling and I can digest that. You trying to make themes and that are more serious palatable for kids is something that we have to do as writers and address those. But I think more importantly for me, I wanted to show Lupe being a biracial and bicultural child and how that feels, and going between different cultures and trying to merge those, and how sometimes there are hiccups when your families don't understand one another and you're like kind of like, Switzerland trying to get them to understand and get along. And it was something that I experienced as a child, and my kids have as well, to a totally in a different way than I have. But those were probably some of the bigger themes that just came about. So my book got a little complicated. It wasn't just one theme. There were a lot of things that ended up needing to be addressed.
Do you have grandmothers or grandparents in your book, Donna?
I do. Yeah, I have both sets, and it's really interesting because it is a little bit, there's a dinner scene with both sets of grandparents, and we address food culture, which is huge in both Mexican American and Chinese American culture. And so I had these dueling grandmothers and their meals, and it's absolutely something that would happen in my family. And there are also, you have to be cautious because there are cliches in cultures, but there are universal things as well that certain cultures, like that happens. Almost every grandparent will say this but yeah, so I had all sets of grandparents, but I did want to show that they share love. Ultimately, you can have so many different, differences in culture, but love of grandchildren is universal.
Yeah, I think a lot of these books are multi-generational. I noticed, Hena, you mentioned an uncle. I'd like to hear more about that too. The uncle playing such a role in her call to adventure. Is that something you really put in the multi-generational aspect?
Yeah, thank you. So I think for me, that was so important. And I didn't grow up with living grandparents after a young age. And so I had an uncle who, really filled that role for me. So I wanted to explore that. But yeah, I think for me, Amina's song, similar to what you said, Donna, I think for me, I set out to write a story about belonging and, about your heart sort of living in different places and feeling, torn in a way, in a positive way, like feeling torn when you love two places and you don't know how to be in both places at the same time and wish you could be. But I think out of the story, just much like you said, other themes grew, and I realized that I was writing about ultimately like the danger of the single story. And, that whole idea when Amina decides to share the story of Malala with her classmates, thinking, here is a hero from my country that I'm so proud of, the youngest Nobel Prize winner. And then everyone's like, whoa, wait, what? She got shot. And that was the only part of the story that they could focus on and assume that meant that's what life was like for all young girls in Pakistan. And of course, Amina, having been there, knows that that's not the case at all. So it's fun to see how your story can just sort of take different paths. And I love that you mentioned also the boy stuff, because that that came up in my story too, because I wanted her to have a friend who loved music as much as her and sort of could push her in new directions musically. But then all the expectations that other people have when they're watching a new friendship, especially if it's, you know, a girl-boy relationship, and, you know, what does that mean? And I think it can be such, you know, a common theme, and also, you know, something that kids are wrestling with. But I thought of a good companion book for yours, Donna. This Is Not a Test by Madeline Rosenberg and Wendy Shang. They also have Dueling Grandmothers. It's a Chinese American and Jewish American family. And,
awesome. It's called This Is
Not a Test, I believe.
Okay.
It's
Making note.
And it features a male protagonist.
I want to be a dueling grandma right now. I want to become one. It sounds so fun. What a great job description. What do you do? Oh, I'm a dueling grandma.
Seriously, especially if there's cooking involved, right? Cook off.
Exactly. No, eat my food. Yeah. I love that both of you guys talked about, you know, processing some of the struggle and the pain that comes in this in-between worlds that kids grow up in, but you're also talking about some of the gifts and the joys of it. And so that's something I think I've moved to through my writing, is real. And as I've growing older, maybe also that realizing what a gift it is to grow up between cultures. That I almost feel sorry for people who don't have to code switch now, because for me, and I see kids doing this, when kids are learning these cultures at a young age and they have developed that capacity to code switch, it's almost like a language, where when I learned it as a child, now I can go into almost any culture and pick up cues and understand some nuances that a monocultural person doesn't have that capacity. So in my book, Home is in Between, I really tried to focus on how she realizes that it ends up being that her code switching ends up being almost like a superpower, that it creates a more space in her life to welcome lots of cultures. As you said, you talked about being Switzerland, I think, Donna, that idea, and, you know, Shanti means peace. So there is a kind of a unique ability to peacemake or to navigate cultures that you get once you grow up between cultures. That's really, you can't acquire that almost any other way, because as a language, because learning it as an adult is like learning a language as an adult. You can get there and become proficient, but you'll never be as fluent as you are when you learn a language as a kid. And I think it's the same thing with the between cultures life.
That's such a great way of putting it. I love that.
There's so many through lines for each of your books. Honestly, it was just a gift to be able to prepare for this session, because I just thought, wow, here are these three writers who didn't write these books, obviously, in concert with each other, and yet they all speak to each other in really strong ways. And one thing I really noticed, that there's this beautiful arc of immigration almost, where Home is in Between is the story of a Bengali immigrant girl. Amina's Song is, I'm presuming, a first generation Pakistani American girl in Wisconsin, and Lupe Wong Won't Dance, she lives in this very mixed biracial Mexican Chinese family. It's kind of assumed that they've been in Issaquah, Washington for some time. And I also really appreciate, Donna, that you acknowledge that there's also people that have been here for thousands of years, even before this was a country. So that was very, very awesome in your book. But really, your books are just a gift of representation, I think, for young readers today, a mirror for them who are very likely existing along some spectrum of that kind of place of either being a new immigrant or first generation or third, fourth, fifth, like someone like me, whose family has both, an immigrant on my Filipino side and then on my Mexican side been here for generations. So I just want to appreciate you all each for that. And I'm just, you've talked about so many different amazing things. But there is, for me, the theme that kind of came out is not only the duality and the appreciation of these two cultures, but also kind of like a moment when when either Shanti or Amina or Lupe did feel kind of that disconnection from people around her, or people just feeling like, maybe the adults don't understand what I'm trying to go through right now, or my friends aren't really getting what my experience is, and looking for that ally. And I'm just curious if you can speak to a moment in your life when you might have felt a similar disconnection from your peers, your community, and a time when an ally was able to come through.
I can speak to one thing. I mean, it's just such a vivid memory. When I was a child and I think we were taking the California Achievement Test. I don't know if that dates me or not. I don't know if they still do that, but it was the part where we had to mark the racial bubble on the little Scantron. And I got to that part and it said, choose one. And it felt very weird to me to try to figure that out. And it was the first time I remember doing that. I don't know if they filled it out when I was really little, but I think I was probably 3rd or 4th grade and I didn't feel comfortable choosing one. And I remember a well-meaning teacher came by and said, just mark white. And I think that she knew that I was biracial. And I think that was her way of, I took it as somehow that was better than the other. And it just felt like such a gut punch because, you know, a lot of the people that I love the most were Latino. And I was like, okay, so do I not mark this? I don't even know if back then it said Latino. I think it might have said Hispanic or Mexican. I don't remember, but that was one thing though, that when you say, was there someone who kind of came to help? It was a long time ago. And I didn't really feel that. I remember going home and talking to my mother about it, who was an educator. And she just said, she goes, mark all your bubbles. She's like, put whatever you want or mark other and write it in. And so to this day, when I get the census, the US Census, I'm like, they're going to open mine up and be so annoyed because I like write in a long paragraph answer. I'm not going to fill their bubble because I'm like, it's complicated. And telling someone you have to be this one thing is tricky. And as a child, that was a hard thing for me to navigate. And I feel bad saying that I didn't really, other than, you know, my mom telling me embrace all of these things, I didn't have anybody like a teacher, an educator helping me with that. And I think I always felt different than the other kids that I had to, you know, even kids. I mean, there was a boy when I was little who had moved from India. He had his own bubble. And so I felt like, you know, there was some of us who are biracial. Like, what do you do? How does that, you know, just makes you feel different.
Yeah, I can remember something. Well, it's a different story, but I remember similar to Amina, which is why I wanted to explore this, you know, sort of having this awakening when I was in middle school, after I went to Pakistan, and I felt, you know, like I was missing out. And I remember coming back and feeling so sad in a way that, you know, I have all these relatives overseas who adore me just because of who I am, you know, and there's all this coming and going, and there's people just dropping by for tea. And there was just so much activity and love, and our life here in the suburbs of Maryland just felt so lonely. And so I remember just coming back, and no one could understand that, you know, like my peers, you know, everyone was happy with their life. And, you know, before I went, I was happy with mine too. But all of a sudden I felt this absence of something that I loved. And now in terms of allies, I feel like I was lucky to have a really good friend who lived across the street, who was Jewish American and didn't go to my public school, but went to a Jewish day school. And she would visit Israel from time to time and visit her family in Switzerland from time to time. And so she got it. And it was funny because I had almost forgotten about this time period. And years later, she was like, remember when you came back and you were so mopey and you were like, well, I hate it here. And that's what sort of rekindled that memory in terms of wanting to explore that whole notion of feeling torn and not having your attachments sort of spread out.
Yeah. Oh, I know. There's in Bengali culture, you have all these different names for uncles and aunts, and just all the connections, and just really mourning that. I remember that feeling as well. In fact, I thought Christina was Bengali when I first met her because Mitra is a Bengali name, and I was like, "Oh, are you Bengali?" She said, "No." So we had a long discussion about that. I think I would I would say that as a child, especially as a code switching child, you develop the capacity to notice nuance and nonverbals very early on, and you learn to assess people. So I can remember understanding that spirit of hospitality, even if people bumbled and made mistakes. So I remember there were people who'd, they're always the people that say the dumb things like, oh, you're from India? Do you know my doctor? And there's like a zillion, just you as a child, you're still like, oh my gosh. Or, people would come up to you and say, oh, do you speak Indian? And then you have to explain there's no language that's Indian and etc. But you still can receive those questions differently if the intention is hospitality versus the intention of alienating you. And as a child, I remember becoming astute early on to read the nuances of how a person was approaching me and to sense if there was that spirit of hospitality and generosity and welcome, even if they were saying dumb things. And I especially paid attention to how people treated my mother. My father had a lot more power, I think, because he was completely bilingual. He was he studied in London. He was able to move very easily in Western circles. But my mother had, she wore her shari, she had the red dot, she had the red thing in her part that showed she was married. She had her 2 bangles. She had a very heavy accent. Her English wasn't proficient. And so when I'd go out with my mother, I'd pay attention to how other adults treated my mom very closely. And whenever I saw a nuance of graciousness, or I just would find myself being drawn to that person. So I would say that the allyship I experienced as a child was very much in the nuances and the nonverbals and the intentions, which I learned very early on to discern because I had to in order to do that code switching.
I've thought a lot about exactly what you just said recently. I work in healthcare as well. And I think that when you grow up seeing that and there's that spirit of trying to understand people and code switch, you can do that in your daily life as well. And I took that into my adulthood and my career. And I think as well, because I saw exactly what you say, how people treated my family. But I was going to ask you this, because one thing I have found with myself is that even if someone isn't as receptive, or if I get kind of a cold feeling, I work harder to try to get them, I don't want to say to like me. And I think I don't know if it's a wound from my childhood, but I think that I always, my parents said, you have to try to get along to people because, you are with people, you didn't want to call attention to the otherness or whatever. And that was just the time. But I think I carried that into my adulthood. And I wondered if you did as well. Inadvertently, you might not know, like subconsciously, do you try or do you just walk away? Like if somebody is, really unreasonable, I know when to walk away. But there are times I find myself trying harder to get people to understand me, maybe. I don't know. I thought about this. Do you do that?
Well, let me go first, Hannah. I'm sure you have beautiful perspective on that too. I can't wait to hear what you say. But I feel that this bicultural life is an invitation, or multicultural life, or any time you have a chance to love across borders, like you do with dueling grandmothers, or like you do with your Jewish American friend across the street and your Pakistani uncle. When you have a chance to love people who are so divergent like that, and you increase your capacity to love because it becomes something that you're doing as a practice, that is a call to becoming more human. And so even though it feels like you have to work harder, I feel like it's what everybody should be doing. And because we got to grow up like this, we have this capacity to imagine life in other people's shoes. That is something that I think I wish for all human beings. I almost feel like I'm advantaged rather than having to work harder. I feel that because I'm able to see the nuance, maybe perhaps faster than somebody who grows up with just one identity entrenched with people around them who all share that identity, who know who they are, because it's easy to know who you are when you're just surrounded by people who are like you. So I almost feel like I've come to see that what a huge advantage. And I feel like some of us who are, as you described, Donna, in your medical work, we're better at our jobs because we have this ability to hold the both and so it's a call to be more human. I would invite other people. In the last scene in my book, Shanti invites everyone in to talk about their villages into her space in between. And that's a call to become more human. So I feel this great gratitude for my childhood.
I love that. I love what you said about, being so aware of your mother and how people were treating her. And that just brought back this flood of emotion, because I remember feeling that same way. And I feel like so many children of immigrants are hyper alert, and sort of have to step up sometimes too, and sometimes translate or sometimes explain things on both sides. And it's a lot of responsibility for a young person. But I feel like you said, it does make you more empathetic. It makes you more aware of your surroundings and sort of reading people. And it's interesting now to sort of, as an adult, to go back and sort of look at things that my parents did and to sort of understand where they were coming from. Even I notice sometimes, like, the way my mother, she has some health problems now, but just the way she defers to authority or like medical professionals, and even just anybody in any type of even service industry.
He's a doctor, Hena, he is a doctor.
Right? There's no questioning. And I'm like, well, you don't have to just say you're fine and feel like, you're bothering him by telling him what's actually going on with you. But there's this formality and this, respect for authority, and even seeing some of the generational changes, if my kids, like, certain things that I never in a million years would have dreamt of doing as a kid, like asking a teacher for an extension on a project. It would be like, what? Like, why didn't you get it done on time? What's wrong with you? Like, it didn't even occur to me that was a thing. And I was like later in shock when my friends would sometimes mention, I was like, you can do that? You can ask for more time. But, I think that was also ingrained in me from my family, that, anybody with authority or anybody who was, telling you how to behave, like, I was so obedient and, polite, but at the same time, I think very aware and taking it all in. And there was this anger inside of me, even if on the exterior I was, complying. I didn't always agree with, the way I saw things. And now I definitely don't as an adult.
Yeah, I remember when my boys who grew up American began rolling their eyes. I was like, no, that doesn't happen in that. It was so hard for me to process that.
Yeah. There's no what is talking back? Talking back is not a thing.
Well, thank you all for just speaking to, really the allyship, but also just the code switching and the nuances, that you noticed as children, and that obviously children today and your readers still notice everywhere around them. I would definitely call Amina and Lupe. Actually, you referred to that Lupe's mother calls her a social justice warrior, and I just wanted to bring that into this discussion because I feel like we're talking about, the kind of things that you see around you, and sometimes you may not feel as a young person that power or that empowerment to make a change. However, with Amina and Lupe, we really do have these amazing, young protagonists that want to change either a preconceived notion of their people or just don't understand, this tradition of square dancing. Like, where is it coming from? Why is it here? And so I was hoping that Donna and Hena, you might be able to speak a little bit more about, you're both writing about 7th grade girls who want something more for the world that they're in. And I think that's incredibly powerful. And I would call them both activists. And I'm curious what your take is on that, is if you see your characters as your protagonists as activists, and what you want for your readers to take from that.
Well, for me, I would say that Amina, in many ways, I love seeing all the books about speaking up and, protesting and, taking charge and making a difference. And but I think, especially when I was writing Amina's voice, I was so happy to see people include her on lists when about brave girls or strong girls, because she's shy and she's inhibited and she has serious stage fright and she's afraid to let her voice shine, but she has to grow into herself. And at the end of the book, she's still a shy, inhibited person by nature, even if she learns to overcome part of her challenge in that way and to use her voice. And I feel like, for me, people sometimes put me in that category, and as a change maker. I think all of us as writers who are writing diverse books, it's sometimes uncomfortable because I feel like not everybody, some people charge towards that, that role and want that attention, or want not even attention, but want to fill that spot, and they don't mind the attention. And I think others are more reluctant. And Amina is sort of that reluctant girl who is finding that her voice matters and that she can make a difference. And I feel like she almost feels this sense of duty, an obligation to do it because she can, and because she's conscious of it and she sees something, and so she's able to do it. And so I'm hoping, I think there's just there are so many inspiring stories of so many kids doing great things, but we're not all Greta, and we're not all Malala. And so there's a lot of room for the other kids who maybe need to think about it in different ways and see different types of role models. So I like to think of her as one, but not in your face about it, if that makes sense.
Well, and obviously Lupe is a more in your face character, but
great. Great and totally important too. I don't mean to say they should, I love those girls.
No, but she was written because I shouldn't say most, but I think more so people are like myself and my daughters who we're afraid to speak up, or that we don't want to call attention to ourselves. We don't want to rock the boat. And Lupe was just a reaction to, I'm like, I'm going to write a character. If I can't speak those things and my kids can't speak those things, I'm going to write a character who does. And so it just kind of came about that way. But I also wanted to show that, by doing that, sometimes just being loud and boisterous, you fall flat on your face. Like if you jump into things too quickly and for the wrong reasons, the world tends to knock you down a peg. And so that's what happened with Lupe, is that she just went about it the wrong way. And at first, and she learns along the way, and in the hard way, she hurts friends, and things happen, and she pays the price and has to make some sacrifices in the end to do the right thing. But she's changed in a way at the end that she realizes, there's still more work to do. But I think she learns that she needs to do things with a little bit more compassion and empathy. And, my children's great grandfather was this really soft-spoken man. He had immigrated from China, and he just would always say the most profound things about, how when you have a goal, if you speak softly. I mean, he was always doing Tai Chi, and that the grandfather in the book is kind of based on him. He taught Tai Chi, and he was very just so calm and peaceful. And people listened to him because he just approached things very carefully, and he would listen to others and then he would speak. And I think hopefully Lupe learns a little bit of that by the end. But because I don't think everybody, we want to say to kids, oh, find your voice. Well, that's easy enough to tell someone to do. It's a different thing for someone who I was when I was a child, or my kids were. It's easy enough for someone to say, well, you need to go say something. Well, it's not always so easy. The world can be a hard place to navigate, especially, for certain kids, their confidence level, and there are other complicating factors sometimes.
Absolutely. I want to bring us back to something that you mentioned, Donna, early on, which was food. I feel like for many of us, a favorite topic, especially when you're putting it within a multicultural, cultural context. The dueling grandmothers that you referred to, I love those characters. And I thought that you really created such an inclusive, very believable world in Lupe Wong Won't Dance. And actually for all of your stories. And so there's a moment for in each of your books around food. There's actually multiple moments. Honestly, Hena Khan, after I read Amina's song, I was like, can I please go get myself some Pakistani food right now? I was Googling things I didn't know what they were. I'm like, yep, that looks great. I want that. But, you know, for both you and Mitali, Hena, you have this moment, sort of the lunchtime moment of, there's an image that happens in the book, Home is in Between, Mitali, where, you know, you've got the kids with the sandwiches, and then the home cooked meal that looks, you know, honestly delicious. But on the illustration, you know, little Shanti is feeling not so great about it. And similarly, there's a moment in your book between Amina and her friend Emily. So I was just hoping that you two could talk a little bit more about kind of why you included those in your stories, and where that kind of moment of, sometimes it could be a little bit of shame, sometimes it could be an opportunity for a microaggression to actually happen between young people at lunchtime.
Oh yes, the school cafeteria, the hall of horrors, where we all survived the cafeteria, right? And it's just a painful place. It's where it all plays out. And it's not surprising that it's around the table, you know, the place where family and tradition and you know, meals are so central to identity. So yeah, I distinctly remember, because my mom ground all her spices from scratch and sent our, because she cooked it fresh and she sent it fresh, and my parents never ate any Western food. And so that was always a time of tension, because the spices were pungent and delicious, and my friends didn't know what they were. And so it encapsulates sort of a metaphor for the code switching, the beauty of having two cultures. So, you know, people whenever I go to conferences, and then they say, well, what's your meal preference? What's your allergies? What do you don't like? I'm like, I eat everything. That's my problem. Because I learned how to just really enjoy food from lots of cultures. And so, yeah, I definitely think it's the place, one of those places where it all comes into focus when you think about what this is about, how a child is growing up. And around the table, yeah, so in the book, I actually, it's interesting, the dance between the illustrator and the artist. I can show you the scene there, but it's right here. And she's eating, you know, she's eating her tiffin box, and everyone's kind of looking at her, and she's aware of the smell in a new way, because she's smelling it through their nose. That happened to me. A lot of these little scenes, these in the corners where, you know, her mother's looking at the picture from home and missing, those were all right out of my own life, my own memories. So I suggested to Lavanya how to, you know, the scenes that she drew, but then she of course added her own touches. So so a lot of this book are out of distinct memories. There's a scene where she's standing in a grocery store line, and the people, her mother's taking time. She's learning a new currency, and she's trying to figure out the change. And you can see that what we talked about earlier, the people behind her in line are irritated, and you can see Shanti noticing that. Her mother doesn't, and how she is just enraged at these people, but her mother's just trying to get the transaction done. These were memories of mine. All of these panels. Oh, and here she gets a bad grade on her paper. A C- for a little girl like me. Oh, that was hard. So these are all my memories, and I hope that as children see the book, that especially when it comes to food too, because a lot of the scenes include food, that they will you know, just see that the tension is part of the journey, holding both of these things together. And again, as I said at the end, hopefully they'll see. And I love the fact that Hena and Donna, when children see you embodied, you know, our and that we hold our books up, and they see us, that as people who've survived that particular hero's journey, just the fact that you guys are here writing and telling your stories is just such a powerful way for children to say, I can make this, I can do this, I can do this. Look at this hero in front of me with her book about Amina and her book about Lupe. So I just love that you embody the triumphant hero's journey for these kids.
Thank you. And also, I find that kids sometimes are so excited about the food too, that that they eat those things also, and that they enjoy the same tasty things. And I do get accused of making people hungry through my books often. I can't help it because it's such a huge part of my culture. And we are feeders and we're food pushers, and every occasion is about food. But the lunch scene that you mentioned, it was kind of funny because in Amina's voice, Emily is sort of initially we're not sure if she might be a mean girl, and she actually isn't. She's somebody trying to change herself and become a sincere friend, and is looking for sincere friends after realizing she doesn't want to hang with the mean girls. But Amina remembers kids not being nice about the lunchroom and things like that. And so it was nice to bring that back in Amina's song and have Emily herself bring a shami kebab, which is a very distinctly South Asian, pungent, as Mitali mentioned, aromatic is a better term maybe, food. And she's surprised after coming back from Pakistan to see her friend bringing that in her lunch, and she's looking wistfully at her own turkey sandwich, which is on the approved list that mom has and has followed. And it was funny because someone like me who grew up sometimes getting the shami kebabs or the whatever in my lunchbox, and kind of be like, whoa, what's wafting from my lunch space. It was so funny when my kids were growing up for them to get a little older and say like, oh, can we get stuff like my friend brings lo mein, and like Joseph brought a samosa, and I'm like, what? Like, Joseph brought a samosa to school, like you can do that now? And they were like, we want interesting ethnic food in our lunches. And so I do think it's changing. And so I also wanted to draw attention to that kids from all backgrounds are bringing all kinds of foods and expanding their palate. So it's fun to explore that.
It's interesting though, because it reminds me of that discussion about the spectrum from cultural exchange to cultural appropriation. And so like you think about things like dance, can I dance the hula? Can somebody who's like the entire Bharatanatyam team, none of them are Indian. I think because they've just become so much better than some of the Indian dancers that when they tried out, and then the Indian students are like, hey, wait a minute, this is our dance. So dance and music are somewhere further along the spectrum when it comes to cultural things that can be appropriated. But with food, it feels like that somehow is welcomed. When someone tells me, oh, hey, what's your recipe for, aloo gobi? What's your recipe for aloo gobi? And I'll be like, and I don't care if they're white or black or brown. I want to talk about aloo gobi, right? So it's kind of the last place where maybe we don't have to worry about crossing a line into appropriation. When you talked about all these kids bringing different things, and that's joyful, right? So it is that last place where I think we can say, hey, man, I love a ceviche. Here's my recipe, but here's my ceviche recipe. And no one's going to say to me, you're appropriating, hopefully, but still. So something mysterious about food there. It's a good question, Christina.
If I could have a whole session where all we talk about is food and our favorite food books and children's literature, I'm there. So
I would love that. Please invite me.
We'll have to do that when we're allowed to be in person and can actually enjoy the food together.
Yes.
Well, each of you have spoken in different times about friendships, and I didn't want to miss out on the opportunity just to talk about how friendships really play into how to bridge the divide between the cultures that each of your characters may experience, and the power of friendships to ease sometimes that internal strife, that identity crisis that we see in Amina's book. So I just was hoping that you could speak to the power of friendships as you approached it in your book. Each of your books, your protagonists, really finds friendship both to be a source of inspiration and support, but also sometimes a way to grow in a way that's challenging as well. As I'm thinking about Lupe Wong Won't Dance. So I'm hoping that you could speak to that, and if there's a particular secondary character that's a favorite of yours that is one of the friends, feel free to share that as well.
I like all of Lupe's friends. I love them. I would hang out with all of them. Her best friend is Andy, and Andy is Black. And one thing I wanted to show with Lupe and her friendship with Andy was that there were parts of Lupe, and this was me carrying my wound into the book, that I didn't share parts of my cultures with some of my friends. And it was because either I had heard their parents make comments or they had made comments. So I was afraid to speak to those things. And I was afraid that, if certain family members would show up at my house, I would be like, oh gosh, are they going to speak Spanish or, what have you? And at the end of the book, I wanted to show Lupe's growth in that she makes a comment to that. She's like, I'm not going to hide these parts of who I am. And she even sees parts of her friend Andy that she didn't know about. And she's like, we need to start sharing more about these parts of ourselves that we might have been ashamed of before, which it's a false shame because the friends aren't judging them. It's in Lupe's case, she was the one that was carrying that. It wasn't her friends saying or doing anything to make her have that fear. And then also Lupe has friendships with boys, and I kind of based that with my daughters. They didn't carry the baggage I did as a kid. Like there were definite lines at a certain age. It's like, oh, there are girls and there are boys, and you don't hang out at a certain point. And I remember having friends that I played with in elementary school, and then you got to middle school and suddenly you had to like pretend like you didn't like each other. And my children never did that. And I don't know if that's something that's happening with the times, but I wanted to show that Lupe had friendships with her friend Niles, who Niles is also on the autistic spectrum. And I wanted to show that, and my kids have had friends who are on the spectrum. And I think that there was such this separation of children who, when we were young, they wouldn't have been mainstreamed in our classroom. And I wanted to show that not only are they mainstreamed, that, my daughters have amazing friendships with someone like Niles in the book, and that he is, he's a good friend. He helps Lupe in ways, and he tries to teach her things. Like he's a good teacher for her, and he contributes probably way more to the friendship than she does to him. So, but I wanted to show that she has this healthy friendship with a boy, and also with her friends, and that, by the end, she can share parts of herself that maybe she was afraid to, and she learns to be a better listener with Niles and a lot of things. But I wanted to, it's hard because sometimes are we just going to have one friend? And I wanted Lupe to have many.
Well, I'll add, for me, I think friendship is one of my very favorite things to write about. And I think when I came up with the idea for Amina's voice, it really began as a friendship story between her and Sujin, her Korean American best friend, who she really feels very close to because they both understand what it's like to be children of immigrants and have two cultures and so on. And she feels threatened when Emily enters the picture. But I also really loved exploring the family friends. And for me growing up, it was almost like two worlds. And when she's upset with her school friends, she has a moment even where she's thinking, well, I have these people, who are like my pseudo cousins, my family. And in Amina's song, since she does bond with actual family in Pakistan, it was fun to explore some of the jealousy that Rabia, her family friend, feels when she returns and she's gushing about her cousin Zora and how awesome she is, and all of a sudden she's like, wait, she's getting this weird vibe from Rabia who's not feeling it. But just the whole idea that friends can grow and change and even develop divergent interests, but still be there for each other in different ways, and that's something Amina has to figure out and slowly realizes how to be the friend for her friends that she needs to be as well, that it's both. And that was something fun for me to explore in both books, is sort of Amina's realizations with regards to friendships and her falling down and not always being the friend she should be, maybe because she's being self-centered or whatever it is, and having to look past. So yeah, it's always my favorite thing to explore, and I'm glad you asked the question because it's like where my heart lives.
I'll only add that my name means friendship, and I have a sister named Sonali whose name means gold, and Rupali means silver. And so Mitali means friendship. I always felt like I got the most precious thing of all. So it's definitely in my books and in my heart.
I love that so much. Oh my goodness. Well, I could just be here all afternoon with you all. Thank you so much for everything that you've shared. Thank you for your work. Thank you for the representation that you offer our young readers. I just wanted to offer you, if there's any closing words that you wanted to let our audience know about you and your book here today.
Just thank you. From me, thank you for being here and for listening and for checking out all of our stories. And thank you, Christina, for moderating.
Yeah, thank you. This was so much fun. It felt way more like a conversation than a panel. And I'm very grateful for that and learning about your books and characters and you. I'm so happy to have met you both.
Yes, definitely. And thanks for the hospitality, Texas, at San Antonio, and for having us and for caring about these stories and for caring about the kids that you want to develop a sense of self and power. So we're with you. We're all Team Kid here.
Thank you, Christina. This was wonderful.
Thank you each. And thank you to the San Antonio Book Festival for organizing this, for allowing us to have the space to have these really rich conversations about the duality in cultures. I know nothing like this existed in terms of what you've all been writing for me when I was a young reader. And so I'm just so grateful for your work. I want to end just with, in Mitali's book, in the home is in between, in the author's note, Mitali, your author's note is so lovely. And you end it by saying something like, well, not something like, exactly like, I quote, the space between cultures doesn't have to be a barrier. For children who grow up there, it can become a threshold of gratitude to celebrate the best of many worlds. And so I just end with that as you ended your book, because I hope that we can each experience the threshold of gratitude to celebrate the many worlds that we inhabit. I think it's just beautiful. So thank you again, Donna Barba Higuera, Hena Khan, Mitali Perkins, for sharing this time together. And audience, thank you for being here with us. We hope to be able to see you in person at the next book festival. And hopefully, we really hope that you do purchase these titles. We know that you will love them as much as I have come to love them. Lupe Wong Won't Dance, Amina's Song, and Home is in Between from Nowhere Bookshop or your local independent bookstore. As you know, independent bookstores have had such a hard time during the pandemic, so we hope that you will support them. Just press the buy the book button on the festival site. Thank you so much. Goodbye.